Well, Israel says that it's received new intelligence, Bev, to suggest that Hamas militants are operating from that Rafah border crossing area. This really stems back to an incident that happened a couple of days ago. There was a barrage of rockets, Hamas rockets, that was shot out of Rafah towards soldiers, Israeli soldiers, at the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is another crossing into Gaza. In that barrage, 4 Israeli soldiers were killed and a number are still in a serious and critical condition in hospital. And Israel says as a result of that, they have identified that those rockets and Hamas militants have been operating from around the Rafah crossing area, which is why they say they have launched, in their words, what they call a limited and specific operation targeting 2 areas in eastern Rafah. This area at the Rafah border crossing and also another area in eastern Rafah. But this is unprecedented because for the first time now, Israeli forces are on the ground in Rafah. This is an area that they declared a safe zone. It's also now taken control of this Rafah border crossing, which is one of the major humanitarian aid crossings into Gaza. And Israel hasn't been able to tell us what's going to happen to the flow of humanitarian aid in there. Certainly UN agencies have expressed grave concerns about what's going to happen there, particularly given that Israel says that operation at the Rafah crossing is ongoing and therefore the crossing remains closed. No humanitarian aid is getting in through Rafah, and also at Kerem Shalom, the other major crossing, that is closed as well. So the 2 main routes for humanitarian aid, they're both closed, and Israel so far hasn't been able to provide any updates about what's going to happen to the flow of humanitarian aid and whether or not this signifies the start of what has been a wider planned operation, a ground invasion of Rafah that we've been hearing about from Israeli security and Israeli government officials for months now.
Yeah. You know, we were talking last night, Allyson, about just the fear and the indecision of many Palestinians as to what to do, when to move, where to go. They weren't given that much warning. How is this humanitarian crisis that is potentially going to explode, going to be contained?
I don't think anyone knows at the moment. The United Nations agencies say that they're not getting very much of a response from Israel. Certainly in a military briefing that I was in this morning with Israeli officials, I too couldn't get any answer from them about what's going to happen to the humanitarian situation. And we're not just talking about the physical flow of aid, that is food, water, medical supplies, shelter into Rafah. This is aid that goes across the entirety of the Gaza Strip. And at the moment, no one really knows what's going to happen, and Israel certainly can't say what's going to happen either. They're not telling us if their troops continue to control that crossing. They haven't revealed any plan of how the operations of Rafah will continue going forward. And so these UN agencies are incredibly concerned about people starving, about people that can't get access to water and medical supplies. But they're also concerned about the psychological trauma of these people in Rafah. Now, as I said, this military action at the moment is in eastern Rafah, but there are people in other parts of Rafah that are so incredibly terrified of what the coming days, weeks, months might look like, and the threat that they will be forced out of there after already being displaced several times to again flee for their lives. And they are also saying to us that they don't know where that they could go. They don't believe that there is any credible other location that is either safe or has any facilities or infrastructure that could support them and their families. So it does feel like this is a new chapter in the humanitarian crisis there, and unfortunately at the moment we just don't know how it's going to unfold.
Yeah, Hamas, Allyson says it had agreed to the latest deal put on the table just in the last couple of hours. Israel has appeared to not only reject the plan, but seems to have really been caught off guard by it.
Yeah, it was a huge 24 hours into this part of the world. Not only did we have these flyers being dropped into eastern Rafah telling people to evacuate, and then about 12 hours later, this operation in eastern Rafah, we also very... in a move that caught a lot of people off guard last night, we had this announcement from Hamas that it had accepted a hostage release and ceasefire proposal by Egyptian and Qatari mediators. And it was certainly something from officials I've spoken with here that Israeli officials were not expecting. Now, Israeli officials have seemed to almost downplay the likelihood of a ceasefire proposal going ahead. They say that there are some insurmountable challenges that has been put forward by Hamas as part of this proposal. Most notably, Hamas wants a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops, which Israel has said it cannot and will not abide by. But it has said that it is sending, in its words, a middle-level team of negotiators, so not its top team, mid-level team of negotiators to Qatar today to engage in further negotiations. But certainly the language that's being leaked here by Israeli officials is downplaying the possibility of Israel agreeing to a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, is in an incredibly difficult position. You've got the right wing, the extreme right of his cabinet, that insists there should not be a deal, that Israel should go into Rafah. And they've even threatened that if Benjamin Netanyahu makes a deal, they will quit the coalition and effectively bring down the government. That will be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's term as Prime Minister here. On the other hand, you've got these distraught and distressed family members of Israeli hostages that are being held captive in Gaza, who feel like this is the key moment to be able to achieve a negotiation for a hostage release and ceasefire deal. They very much fear that if a Rafah invasion were to occur, a more widespread operation, that Hamas would close the door on negotiations and any opportunity to secure getting their loved ones back to Israel would be over.
Yeah, just precarious times. Allyson, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you.